Hello, and welcome to Book Folk. I'm your host, Christian Raffetto, and today I'm joined by my friend, author and pastor Davis Moore. Davis is the author of the book Not by Not, Untangling Life's Core Issues, published by Humble Books. In Not by Not, Davis helps discouraged Christians apply the deep power of the gospel to their most besetting sins for real, lasting freedom. It's a great book, well written. I recommend it. In this interview, we talk about Davis's writing process, how he overcomes the stumbling block that perfectionism can often be to art, how he navigates the tricky overlap between the memoir and Christian living genres, and his experience in being his own sales rep, even to big box stores like Barnes & Noble. It's a great conversation. Davis has a lot of helpful insights, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Without further ado, here's Davis Moore. So, Davis, I just have a couple softball questions for you just to get us started here, okay?
Absolutely.
All right. So, if you had to choose coffee or tea?
Ooh, I am like a hardcore coffee drinker. Like,
Okay.
I do all the cold, make my own cold brew. I do the French presses. Haven't got into chemics yet. I have one, but I haven't done it. So I drink a lot of coffee.
Man, a good French press, it's hard to beat that.
Oh, it is. It is. I got a good deal. I had a buddy in college. He had a French press and he just didn't like it. So he sold it to me for $2. So,
Oh my goodness.
Which as a college kid was like a no brainer, like, so, but I've had that thing with me forever now at this point.
Awesome.
But,
okay, cool. So when you write, paper or computer?
Ooh, it's actually, a mix. So I don't know if you've seen this, but they have this thing called the Remarkable 2.
Okay.
So it's like a paper tablet.
Okay.
So
Wow.
picture like an adult etch and sketch.
Okay.
So basically it feels like you're writing on paper. The tip of the pen is like made from cardboard. So when
Okay.
you write, it sounds and feels like paper, like
Wow.
exactly like paper. But there's no backlight on the tablet, so you have to use a reading light if you're like in bed at night, with no light on. So there's no issue, and then you can upload it right to the cloud, and then you can press a button and turn it all to type text.
Wow.
And then send it as a PDF to yourself in email.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So I take that absolutely everywhere with me. And then sometimes though, I'll pull up Scrivener and I'll just start writing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, on the computer.
Awesome. So sort of both. I mean, that what's it called?
Yeah.
The Remarkable 2?
Yeah, they're Remarkable 2. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So like usually when I'm doing ideas and I'm just kind of like storyboarding and stuff, I will start with the Remarkable and I will make all my little drawings or make all my little bullet points, and then I'll take that, set it next to my computer, and I'll write from there.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, favorite place to write?
Ooh, I'm a huge coffee shop person. I mean, it goes with the coffee. Yeah, I do a lot of my writing in a coffee shop. A lot of my editing for sure in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And then I'm a morning person, so sometimes I like to wake up really early and I'll just kind of write in my office at the house here, and I'll do it that way. Somewhere quiet at the very least.
Yeah, excellent. Cool.
Yeah.
Do you eat snacks while you're writing?
Oh, that's a really good question. Not all the time. No. I think part of it is because it's really early typically when I'll write. So I'll usually have a cup of coffee with me, maybe like a protein bar or something like that.
Okay.
But I'm a little boring when it comes to snacks.
Any other like writing rhythms that you found to be helpful?
Yes, I'm a huge perfectionist, unfortunately, and I'm working on that. And that used to like really stop me from writing, so I printed off this like sheet of paper. I wrote, basically I pull up a Google Doc and I just wrote, it's okay to write it bad the first 100 times. And I put it right above my computer. And every time I hate myself when I see a sentence, I look up at that and I just keep going,
Nice.
But like, that's a rhythm thing that I will sometimes use to just say, it's okay. It's the first draft. It's good. It'll be all right.
That's a good one. I need to hear that one.
Okay.
Favorite book. This one might be the hardest of all the softball questions.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Fiction or non?
Let's do one of each.
Okay. So fiction, I'm gonna give you two because
Okay.
it's like a two-way tie.
Okay.
I love Frankenstein and Dracula. Those are
Okay.
probably my two favorite books. Actually, we'll throw Jane Eyre in there as well.
Okay.
All three of those, like more of that classic literature. I'm a really big
Yeah.
classic fan. Nonfiction. Oh, that's a tough one too. I'm a really big fan of Donald Miller. I really like just his like kind of memoir style of writing. So like Blue Like Jazz,
Yeah.
um, those are really good. I'm a huge C.S. Lewis nerd. I quote Lewis probably more than any other person in my book.
Yeah.
So like Mere Christianity, A Grief Observed, all of those would be um, huge favorites of mine.
Awesome. Yeah, those are some of them. I have not read Dracula. I read Frankenstein. I have not read Jane Eyre, but I really like Jane Austen.
Yeah,
And in my
yep.
mind, Bronte and Austen are like related. And
I get that. I get
yeah,
that. It's they're similar, right? They got some
yeah.
similarities.
But Lewis, man, and Donald Miller, both they're up there for me too.
Yeah, absolutely,
Nice.
absolutely.
So just diving a little bit into your writing process, what did it look like to write Not by Not for you?
Yeah.
Kind of how did you outline first, or did you just kind of dive in? And maybe it would be helpful to tell a little bit about kind of the inspiration for it and how that kind of led into the writing.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned at the top, Not by Not is a book about how do we as Christians change. So, the first half of the book is kind of laid out as like a theology of change and like what is the process by which we can grapple with this idea called change. And then the second half of the book, it deals with specific core issues that we as people have a tendency to struggle with and walk through. So, I think so. It's actually kind of a funny story. How it kind of started because I didn't go into writing this project to make it a book. It didn't start out that is all. I was in a time of my life where I had received criticism for some of my writing, and it was a friend that I think had the best intentions, but went about it in such a way that was so destructive that like I couldn't write anything for 2 years, like without just immediately getting rid of it and all of that. And it didn't help that, like I said, I'm a perfectionist and all of that. So um, I started writing this during the COVID lockdowns. So I was getting up and there wasn't a lot of stuff going on at the church at the time where I was pastoring. So I was a youth pastor at that time, and none of my teams had internet. So like I'm out in the rural community, you know, so I can't even do youth group online like some of the cool youth pastors were doing, and they didn't have cell phones, so I couldn't even go call them, you know, and I couldn't go to their house. I felt like I was without a job almost. So I was just finding stuff to do, it felt like, for a while. But I sat down and I just started writing some essays about some of the stuff I'd noticed with issues people were walking through and those kind of things. So, and pretty soon after writing 4 or 5 of them, I realized, wait, there's a theme to all of these that kind of flow all together. I think this is actually a book. And so at that point, I began to outline and be able to plug in what I had, and then from there be like, I think there's actually something here. And it became over a year. It became about a first draft, and then I sent that out to a couple beta readers, and they gave some suggestions. I ended up cutting a few chapters because there was some stuff that just didn't really fit with that theme, or weren't really presented in such a way that it would be conducive to really be helpful. So added some more chapters in, and became what it is today.
Yeah, excellent. And how did your experience as a pastor and working with people in counseling, how did that kind of feed into the content for Not by Not?
Yeah. So I had met with several people who were dealing with specific issues like anger and stuff like that. And they'd be telling me all these areas in their life where anger was. And after doing some digging, I started realizing there's a core thing here at the root. It's kind of like has all these strands heading out to all of this stuff. And so I'm like, we have to deal with this thing down here before we can deal with that thing up there. And I found once we started dealing with the thing down here below the surface, all these things on the surface level stopped. and it was like when you take out the infection, all the sores go away, and that really became the other inspiration for the book. Uh, after I had started that essay process I went through a few minutes ago. And yeah, that was a huge piece. It probably wouldn't have been a book totally without them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do a great job, and it's interesting that you referenced Donald Miller earlier, because in your book you do a great job with each chapter kind of introducing the topic of that chapter with kind of a personal anecdote.
Yeah.
Did you write the chapter first and then think back over your life and think, hey, this is an anecdote that relates, or was it kind of the other way around? You started with a life experience out of which you extracted sort of a teaching or a parable kind of thing?
Yeah. So I think it depended on the chapter. There was some chapters where the anecdote came first, for example, the Kill the Queen chapter with the hardware store story. That was really, that came first, and then the principle kind of flowed out of that. And there's probably several examples like that. So right at the end of the first draft, I realized something very important, where it was like there was a lot more anecdotal at the end of the first draft, where I realized, like, I have to either make a choice here. This could be memoir, or this could be more of that Christian living space.
Yeah.
And so I had to axe a lot of the more anecdotal stuff to go more towards that Christian living thing. I think I was reading Donald Miller at the time. So I was leaning more towards that memoir side of things, just in how I was looking at life. And so yeah, I remember my wife reading the manuscript and myself reading the manuscript, and both of us coming to the conclusion, you have to pick a way you're going to go here, because you can take it either way and it's going to be fine either way, but you have to really make a choice. And yeah, so I would say some of it started first, some of it came after.
Yeah, that's really interesting you bring that up, because I find with working with authors, that's such a tricky thing, because everybody kind of starts, you want to do both, and you really can't do both just for the sake of your reader, because
Right.
if they want to read about your life, then they want to read a memoir. If they want to read about their lives, they want to read Christian living or self-help. And so you really do have to make that distinction. And there's elements of both in each genre, but they can't overlap completely.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like you can, there's an overlap with the Venn diagram a little bit, of like in self-help or Christian living, you can use examples to really accentuate your point. And in memoir, you can use some of those principles in Christian living to be able to talk about how you came to certain conclusions. But like you said, you have to make a choice, and it's a hard choice, because like I love both genres very, very much, and I think that's when you have to realize, like, there's always going to be a second book, right? Or a third or a fourth, and maybe you do a memoir down the line, or do Christian living down the line, but just kind of pick one where you are and kind of lean into it.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you strike the line perfectly, I think.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
So after you had finished kind of the writing part, talk a little bit about your publishing journey.
Yeah, so that was a long process, because like you get to the end of the writing part and you're like, okay, now what? Like then there's so many. You do one quick Google search for traditional versus hybrid versus self and all these other things, and there's like 1,000 different perspectives on what is good and what isn't good, and why one is better than the other, and then they'll contradict each other. Like this whole conglomeration and a mess. So I went through this process of trying to decide what was going to be best for me. I had a contact with a pretty large publisher in the Christian market, and they were interested. I got all the way to basically the final meeting with the acquisitions team and all of that, and it kind of came down to the manuscript wasn't what they were looking for at that time. And then I think a lot of it too was I was so brand new with like book proposals and stuff like that. My marketing plan was probably not up to snuff with what they were looking for at that time. So I think it was probably a mix of those two things. And they told me to send your next one in, like something like that. So I had a good contact out of it. But so like I after that, I thought about, okay, do I start querying agents and start looking that way? And at that point, I was already, 3 years into the process of this book, and I was like, you know what, I just want to get one out there and start the process. And that's when we decided to go the other route for me.
Yeah, excellent. So then we sort of get into the marketing side of things. Talk a little bit, and I've been really impressed with the marketing that you've done. Talk a little bit about, first of all, kind of your platform and the content that you're putting out, and then the launch team.
Yeah. So as far as content goes, I would still say hey, thank you for the encouragement. I feel like I'm still learning in a lot of ways. So I'm a pastor, and I would say that's where a lot of my platform has come from, and the trust factor that a lot of people have given to be able to listen or seek out content has been through that. Which has been really helpful starting out. But my main like social presence is through like Instagram, and I do a lot of like little mini devotionals on just some graphics I've made in Canva or what. Excuse me, graphics that I've made, and that seems to really generate the conversation, and people will share it. They'll save it, they'll be encouraged by it, that kind of stuff. And I'm just starting to get into reels a little bit. It's like it's always weird to have your face on a camera. I get really self-conscious about that for some reason. So I haven't totally branched out into that yet. That's the next thing. Then I run a newsletter. I through my website, and I share blogs that way, and I kind of lean more into the writing side of things. It helps me. But
Yeah.
as far as launch team goes, I had a few people. My mom, she's like a very helpful person. My mom and a few others, who are really believed in the project. Some of those beta readers, they really grabbed a hold of it, and they were like, "How can we help you?" So what I did, and prior to the launch, was I had each of them contact probably 15 to 20 people to read an early review copy of it. And then not all of those people are going to respond, like they'll initially say they will, but they don't necessarily follow through, or life happens, or whatever the case may be. But it allowed me to have about it was about 10 or so 15 people or so be able to get an early edition of the book, be able to read it, post a review up. So on launch day, there's reviews ready for people to make a decision about purchasing. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that really helped your launch. And then also you had, because of your kind of your email list that you had built, you're able to say, "Hey, my book's out, order it now." And so you
yep,
spiked the orders right there, and you kind of like really you made it to the top of a category, which is
yeah,
a big deal.
yeah,
Um,
I was super excited. I was watching that all launch day, and just kept going slowly up, and that was so sweet. I was so
yep,
excited.
yep. And then so this was the part I was just like really thrilled about watching kind of how you do it. Talk about the bookstores and how you've been able to get placement just uh, like locally,
Yeah,
because I think that'll be incredibly valuable for a lot of our viewers and listeners.
yeah. So my wife calls me, and I've mentioned this before, but my wife calls me annoyingly motivated. So I don't mind going and talking to people, and I think so that's something I learned really early on. I listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of YouTube videos and all the stuff for writers, and one of the things I've heard consistently from a lot of different creators is you have to advocate for yourself, and you have to just go out there and like they might say no, but that's okay. Like you have to at least try, and that can take a lot. I'm a hardcore introvert. So like overcoming that has been hard, but I've found that to be the best way to get a result. I have several. I'm in West Michigan area, and we have several Barnes and Nobles all around, and I've just gone to each of their stores and have asked them if they would be willing to carry the book, and if they could, what kind of deal can we work out? And so far I've gotten two to say yes. One didn't have one, like a local author section, and one of the ones that said yes isn't even put me in a local author section. They're going to put me right in the Christian Living section. Like, so I'm like, that's sweet, and they're going to have me come in, do a couple signings, and do all of that to be able to have that little sticker. It says signed by the author, and but yeah, a lot of that just comes from like just going and asking. I found to be really helpful. I found a Christian bookstore in the town next door to me, and they're looks like they're going to do it as well. So right now we have about 3 or 4 stores that are a yes, and we're going to go from there. Another one I found is usually are pretty helpful is local libraries. They're very open to having books by a local author. And in fact, one of them wrote me and asked, "Hey, where can I purchase it? I want to purchase it for the library. You don't have to donate it. I'll purchase it." So I was like, "That's super sweet. That's awesome." Yeah, you guys kind of find I found you have to kind of just advocate for yourself a little bit and just kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing so in the traditional publishing world, each publisher has a sales rep that every, 3 times a year they go and they pitch to the big names, right?
Mhm.
So they'll go into Barnes and Noble and they'll pitch to a buyer, but they're not going to pitch the entire catalog because the publisher is releasing, however many books in a season.
Right.
They're going to pitch the top ones. And
Right.
so a publisher may say, "Hey, I'm representing you to all these stores, all these outlets," but really your book may not get presented.
Right.
Even if it does, there's kind of a small chance that it's going to be bought. And even if it is bought, it's not going to be placed necessarily in every location. But what
Right.
you're doing is you are kind of your own sales rep. You're going into those stores and saying, "Hey, I'm passionate about this book. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it's about." And so you are your own sales rep and you're pitching it in a way that a sales rep at a traditional publisher couldn't.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
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 And so I'm just thrilled that you're able to get into Barnes and Noble and libraries. That's huge, and that's something just by a little bit of hustle, a little bit of asking. Uh, it's awesome. It's a great result.
Yeah, I have those little victory dances in the car afterwards. We're like, yes, let's go. It's been really cool, and um, I just didn't know what to expect with it. I think there's a lot of that unknown. This is my first book, so you just don't know what to expect with a lot of things. And um, like you said, like you get to really just be your own sales rep. And I feel like for any of those authors that are listening, like your book, better than anybody else is going to know it, and you know why you wrote it, your why, and you know why it's important, and you're able to communicate that, right? And I think that's really the best thing you could ask for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you've also got speaking engagements, and you've got some
Yep.
some church bookstores that are all in. Any more you want to add about those places?
Yeah, I've started trying to get a couple of conference gigs when I can. I found that to be really helpful. I had one few weeks ago, and that made a lot of really good contacts, added to the email list. Got some good, one of the guys actually that was there owns a Christian bookstore, and he asked if he could display the book, so
Right.
I was like, yeah, let me think about it. Sure. Like, that'd be great. That one, yeah, I think putting yourself in those places where people are going to be, especially if they're in your niche, I think that's just really going to be nothing but positive things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Davis, if you've given a lot of good advice during this discussion, but if you had one piece of advice to leave with first-time authors or would-be authors, what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah. It's a wide question. I think if you're in the writing process, I know it can be really discouraging, when you wake up and you feel like I have 40,000 words left to write here, and it's never going to end. Don't think of it as 40,000 words. Think of it as 500 words a day. That's what I did with the book. I didn't write a ton all at once. I just kind of got up an hour before I would do my work for church, and I would write 500 words. And over a few months, that stacks up, and especially if you don't have a deadline, and you're just writing this thing for your own self, or your first time. You know, 500 words I think is doable, and that will stack up over time. If you can't write every day, write 5 days or 4 days or whatever. Just show up consistently. I think that's really important. Don't, and especially in that first draft, don't worry about quality. You're just trying to tell that story to yourself first. You're trying to figure out what this thing is in your head. And it's it's okay for it to be bad. Yeah, like it's expect it to be bad. Like, that was one of the things that I realized at first was like, okay, like I got some really good nuggets here. There's a good set of bones here, but there's a lot of stuff in here that I have to really change and edit, and be okay with that. Like it is not anything negative on you. Everybody has to go through this. So I would say on the writing process, that's really what's helped me a lot. And then on the marketing process, it's that I think a lot of times we're our own worst enemy, and I know a lot of the writers I know are introverts, right? Like we just have a tendency to do that. And that's okay, and I think sometimes it's okay to take a chance on you, like, and go for it. And and do it in small steps. Don't do it all at once,
Right.
Small, consistent steps over a period of time will make you go a long ways.
Yeah. Wise words.
Yeah.
So what's next for you and Not by Not?
Yeah. So I've since launch, I've had people in about 4 different churches at this point. Hopefully they'll expand, but they want to take it through their church's small group ministries. And I was blown away by that. So I think one of the things I'm working on now, I'm currently in my master's program, and this summer I'm taking the summer off from classes. I think I'm going to start working on a companion journal to kind of go along with it, to kind of work as like a package deal kind of thing for churches specifically to take through their small groups, and then maybe some video teachings to go with it as well. And then, so I'm going to continue to just market the book. I have a few pastors I was talking with yesterday about getting the book in their churches, and they were going to read it first and then kind of go from there. So, trying to find people who have access to more people, like that's a whole thing. So that's on that side of the book. That's what's going on there. And then I have a second manuscript done, and it's now in the editing phase. It's a devotional. So hopefully within the next year or so, I'll work on publishing that.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Davis. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
If you are watching this, go pick up your copy of Not by Not by Davis Moore. You can get it on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. There's a link here in the product description or in the video description below. Thank you so much, Davis. Where can people find you?
Yes, you can find me on my website, davismooreauthor.com. And then I'm on all the socials. I'm on Facebook. You can look up Davis Moore. I'm on Instagram at Davis Moore Author. And I'm on Twitter. I don't post there very much, or X, whatever we want to call it now. As Davis Moore as well, or Davis Moore Author. One of those two. Like I said, I don't post there very much. But yeah, those are the best ways to find me.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Davis. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you all for listening and watching.
Thank you so much. We'll see you later.
I'm so grateful to Davis for his insights. I found his notes about overcoming his own perfectionism in the writing process and his method of getting bookstore placement to be particularly inspiring. Hope they were helpful to you as well. Thank you so much, dear listener, for spending time with us today. Tune in next time for more conversations with your fellow book folk. Until then.